standing next to the James Lee Newton Mausoleum. He went by Lee, which is why it says J. Lee Newton Jr. It has the date of 1893. That is the year that he died, although this lot was not purchased until about 2 months after he died. And there's some mystery about this lot and dates. He probably died in Long Island. That's where he was from. Newspaper articles have his remains returning to Peoria sometime later. And he was entombed here in October of 1893. He died in May. And they didn't purchase this until August. So it would not have been enough time to build this mausoleum in time to entomb him in October. So we wonder if maybe the mausoleum had been built or partially built by that time. So he is entombed in here along with his wife, Isabella, and their daughter, Lillian. His daughter, Lillian, didn't die until 1967, and she was never married, and she was the last entombment in here. So then now you can see that the door is painted. There is no actual door. It's a painted wall, basically, in the trompe-l'oeil fashion, meaning that it is two-dimensional, but it appears three-dimensional. This was painted in 2017 by Donald Kettleborough. Newton was kind of an interesting person. He supposedly served in the Civil War, although he would have only been 16. He died of paresis, which is a term that you can look up on your own. Undertaker records use certain terms that are maybe not as common now as they were then. And he was a printer and worked for the Corning and Company as a partner. His wife, Isabel, was the daughter of Henry Mansfield. He had a pharmaceutical company, so they were pretty well off, probably would have been high society. So this is the Newton Mausoleum.
All right, so today I'm out at the Franklin Hall Mausoleum. Franklin Hall was a member and president of the Board of Trade at the time of his death. He was the head of the Frank Hall Company, imagine that. He was also president of the Central Electric Company. He has a slightly larger mausoleum because there is room for 8 entombments in here. He was married to a Florence Schroyer. He and his wife had 2 daughters, Ora and Eleanor. Florence and Frank are both entombed in here, as are Ora and her husband Paul Henry Schmidt. And then their other son-in-law, J. Edwin Elder, he is buried in here, but their daughter Eleanor is not. She died in California, and it's not quite known where she is entombed. However, their daughter Florence, Frank and Florence's granddaughter, is also entombed in here, as well as a Samuel Harrington. Not sure what his connection is to the family, but he is also entombed in here. The other person that was briefly entombed in here for about 2 years was actually Frank Hall's mother-in-law, Mary Schroyer. She was in here shortly after her death, but was removed and put in a different section of the cemetery a couple years later. Okay, here I am at the Alois vault. This vault is considered to be the oldest in Springdale Cemetery. Alois was a kind of controversial person for his time. He was what's called a philosopher and free thinker, and he actually ran the Illinois Banner, which was the first German newspaper in Peoria. He purchased this lot in 1859, so when Springdale was only a few years old, and he purchased it shortly after the death of his 6-month-old son, Louis. As far as who is in the mausoleum, there is some question about that because his wife passed away in 1877, Mary, and then his friend, Carl Fiennes, passed away in 1887, 10 years later. According to various news reports, Carl Fiennes was the first person entombed in the mausoleum. What that could mean is that the mausoleum was built by then, and then later his wife and son were moved into there, but we don't know for sure. Now this, like the others, are sealed, so we can't exactly go in or break in, and we don't have the capability to do like ground penetrating radar or LiDAR to see what or who may be in these mausoleums. But according to the cemetery office, in this mausoleum is the 6-month-old son, Louis, Carl Fiennes, who was a good friend of Alois, and he died without any family and with no money, so his friend basically took him in, and then Alois Satz himself. But according to the cemetery records that we have at the Peoria Public Library, it also says that Mary, his first wife, is in the actual vault.
I'm standing next to the Christian Bueller Mausoleum, the Bueller Mausoleum. There are three entombments in here. Christian Bueller, his wife Phoebe, and his wife's mother, also named Phoebe. Christian Bueller was in the meat trade, and they had one daughter, Annie, who died at about 5 months old, and she's buried somewhere else in Springdale. We're not exactly sure where. These are the only burials in this section, which is Riverview North. It's a very small section here, so that's not really a surprise. Bueller was responsible for the Bueller home, which is still an active place today. He created it as a home for elderly people who had no one else to take care of them, who had no family. Supposedly, this mausoleum is based on the monument for Christian Science movement founder Mary Baker Eddy. So with the tall columns, and also it's round, it's a very unique mausoleum. In 1921, when this was built, it cost over $90,000 in money, 1921 money, which would be over $1.2 million today. And the plot itself was over $2,000 in 1921. So it's probably one of the more expensive, more unique monuments in Springdale.